Jake Morrison stood in the middle of the combat room on the starship Starbreaker and felt very small. Around him towered the biggest warriors he had ever seen. The Crethan soldiers were 8 feet tall with skin that looked like black armor. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light, and their hands ended in claws that could cut through metal. The Valdorian fighters had 4 arms each and moved like deadly dancers. Their blue skin showed scars from many battles. The Sorok warriors looked like giant lizards that walked on 2 legs. Their teeth were as long as Jake's fingers. Jake was just a human. He was 5 feet and 10 inches tall. His skin was soft and pale. He had no claws or armor or special powers. His brown hair was cut short, and his green eyes looked tired. He carried a simple rifle that shot metal bullets. Next to these alien warriors, he looked like a child playing dress-up. Commander Zexther walked into the room. He was the biggest Crethan of all. His armor was covered with marks that showed how many enemies he had killed. When he saw Jake, his red eyes got brighter with anger. He made a sound like grinding rocks when he talked. "Why is this weak thing here?" Zexther asked the other warriors. "We go to hunt the most dangerous beast in the galaxy, and they send us prey instead of a predator." The other aliens laughed. Their laughter sounded like breaking glass and roaring wind. Jake said nothing. He had heard this many times before. Humans were new to the Galactic Alliance. Most aliens thought humans were weak and useless. Keshrak was a young Sorok warrior. His green scales were bright and clean. He had not been in many battles yet. He looked at Jake with curious yellow eyes. "Maybe the human has hidden skills," Keshrak said in his hissing voice. This made the others laugh even harder. A Valdorian named Korth slammed all 4 of his fists on a metal table. The sound was like thunder. "Hidden skills?" Korth said. "Look at him. He has no claws, no fangs, no armor. His weapon is ancient. What skills could he possibly have?" Dr. Elena Rodriguez entered the room carrying data tablets. She was human like Jake, but she was a scientist, not a warrior. The aliens respected her knowledge even if they did not respect her species. Her black hair was pulled back and her dark eyes were serious behind her glasses. "The mission briefing is ready," she said. "Please gather around the holo display." The warriors formed a circle around the glowing table. A 3-dimensional image appeared above it. It showed a dark planet covered in thick jungle. Strange sounds came from the speakers. They sounded like screaming wind and breaking bones. "This is Zarian 7, Elena said. "It is home to the creature you must hunt. The locals call it the Shadow Stalker. No one knows its real name or where it came from. It has been killing mining teams for 3 years now." The image changed to show claw marks on metal walls. The cuts were deep and clean. They went through starship hull like it was paper. Bloodstains covered the floors. "The Shadow Stalker is 12 feet tall," Elena continued. "It can become invisible by changing its skin color. It moves without making sound. Its claws can cut through any known material. It has perfect night vision and enhanced hearing." Jake studied the images carefully. He saw patterns in the claw. Marks, they were not random. They showed intelligence and planning. 3 hunting teams have gone to Zarian 7, Elena said. None returned. "We found their equipment scattered through the jungle. Their weapons were unused. They died before they could fight back." Zexther pounded his chest with pride. "Those were weak hunters. We are the galaxy's finest warriors. This beast will die quickly." The other aliens roared their agreement. They showed off their weapons. Energy cannons that could melt rock. Plasma swords that burned at the temperature of stars. Molecular disruptors that could tear apart any material. Jake checked his simple rifle. It was old but reliable. Humans had been using guns like this for hundreds of years. The bullets were made of dense metal. They did not need fancy technology to work. "The Shadow Stalker hunts at night," Elena said. "It prefers to attack when its prey is sleeping or distracted. It studies its victims before striking. This suggests high intelligence." "Intelligence means nothing without strength," Zexther said. "We will surround it and kill it with overwhelming force." Jake wanted to say something, but he stayed quiet. He had learned that aliens did not listen to human opinions. They would have to learn the hard way. The jungle is very thick, Elena warned. Visibility is poor even during the day. Your sensors may not work properly. The plants interfere with electronic signals. We do not need sensors, Korth bragged. We have our natural abilities. We can smell fear and hear heartbeats. This creature cannot hide from true predators. The briefing ended and the warriors prepared for landing. They put on their armor and charged their weapons. Jake put on simple camouflage clothing and filled his pack with basic supplies: water, food, first aid kit, extra ammunition. Nothing fancy. As they walked to the landing craft, the aliens continued to mock him. They called him Little Prey and Scared Rabbit. They bet on how quickly he would die. Some said he would not last 1 hour. Others were more generous and gave him until sunset. Jake listened to their insults without responding. He had been a soldier for 10 years. He had fought in wars that these aliens had never heard of. He had survived in jungles and deserts and frozen wastelands. But he could not explain this to beings who only understood size and strength. The landing craft shook as it entered Zarian 7's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Jake could see the dark jungle rushing past. It looked like a green ocean with no end. Somewhere down there, the Shadow Stalker was waiting. The aliens were excited for the hunt. They talked about what trophies they would take from the dead creature. Zexler wanted its claws. Korth wanted its head. They already saw themselves as heroes. Jake stared out the window and felt something the others did not. This was not going to be a simple hunt. The Shadow Stalker had killed many trained warriors. It would not be easy prey. But maybe that was not the point. Maybe the real test was not about killing at all. The craft touched down in a small clearing. The jungle pressed in from all sides like green walls. Strange sounds echoed through the trees. The hunt was about to begin. The jungle air hit them like a wet blanket when the landing craft doors opened. It was hot and thick and smelled of rotting plants and unknown dangers. Jake breathed slowly through his nose and let his body adjust. The alien warriors charged. Out with their weapons ready, eager to start hunting, Zarian 7's jungle was unlike anything Jake had seen before. The trees were twisted and black with leaves that looked like knife blades. Vines hung down like ropes, but they moved on their own, as if they were alive. The ground was soft and squishy under their feet. Strange sounds came from every direction. Clicking and whistling and something that sounded like crying. Zexler immediately took command. He pointed his clawed finger at different directions and gave orders in his grinding voice. The Valdorians would scout ahead with their forearms ready to fight. The Sorok would guard the flanks with their powerful jaws open. Jake was ordered to stay in the back and try not to die too quickly. You will carry extra supplies, Zexler told Jake. When you fall behind, we will leave you. Try to scream loudly so the beast comes for you instead of us. The other aliens found this very funny. They laughed their terrible laughs and slapped each other with joy. Jake just nodded and adjusted his pack. He had carried heavy loads before. This was nothing new. They moved into the jungle in a formation that looked impressive but felt wrong. To Jake, the aliens spread out too much and made too much noise. They crashed through bush and stepped on dead branches. They talked loudly and showed off their strength by cutting down plants with their claws. Jake stayed quiet and watched everything. He noticed how the jungle sound stopped when they approached and started again after they passed. He saw broken twigs that bent in directions that meant something big had moved through recently. He found scratch marks on tree bark that were too high for any normal animal to make. After 2 hours of walking, they found the first sign of the Shadow Stalker. It was a tree that had been marked with deep claw cuts. The marks were fresh and went all the way through the thick bark. Dark. Sap oozed out like blood. It knows we are here, Korth said. His forearms flexed and his blue skin turned darker with excitement. Good, Zexler replied. Let it come. We are ready for anything. Jake studied the claw marks more carefully. They were not random scratches made in anger. They formed a pattern. The cuts were spaced evenly and made with careful precision. This was not just marking territory. This was a message. "What do you see, little prey?" Keshrak asked. The young Sorok had been watching Jake with curious eyes. "The marks are too organized," Jake said quietly. "This creature is very smart. It is trying to tell us something." The older warriors heard this and laughed again. "Humans see patterns where none exist," Zexter said. "It is because you are weak. You try to think instead of fight." They kept walking deeper into the jungle. The trees got thicker and the light got dimmer. By noon, it was almost as dark as night under the heavy canopy. The alien warriors turned on lights attached to their armor. The beams cut through the darkness but also made them easy targets. Jake turned off his small flashlight and let his eyes adjust to the dim light. Humans were good at seeing in low light compared to many species. It was something left over from the old days. When his ancestors hunted in caves and forests, they found more claw marks on trees and rocks. Each set was different, but all showed the same careful precision. Jake began to see a trail forming. The shadow stalker was leading them somewhere specific. As the afternoon wore on, they discovered the remains of previous hunting teams. First, they found scattered equipment, energy weapons that had been torn apart, armor pieces that looked like they had been peeled open like fruit. Everything was covered in rust and jungle growth. "Pathetic," Korth said as he kicked a broken helmet. "These warriors died without honor," but Jake noticed something the others missed. The equipment was not destroyed in a fight. It had been carefully taken apart and arranged in neat piles. The shadow stalker had studied the dead hunters' gear after killing them. They found the first body an hour later. It was a Krythan warrior like Zexler. His armor had been opened with surgical precision. The cuts were so clean they looked like they had been made with the finest medical tools. There were no signs of struggle. "He died without fighting," Zexler said with disgust. "Coward." Jake knelt beside the body and looked closer. The warrior's weapon was still in its holster. His hands were relaxed. His face showed surprise but not fear. "He did not see it coming," Jake said. "The shadow stalker killed him before he knew it was there." The sun began to set and the jungle became even darker. Strange sounds grew louder. Something big was moving through the trees above them. The alien warriors formed a defensive circle and charged their weapons. "It comes," Zexler announced. "Finally, we will have a real fight." Jake stayed on the outside of the circle with his simple rifle ready. He listened carefully to the sounds around them. Something was wrong. The creature was making noise on purpose. Real predators were silent when they hunted. A branch snapped to their left. All the aliens turned their weapons toward the sound. Nothing was there. Then a vine moved to their right. They spun around again. Still nothing. "It plays with us?" Korth snarled. "Show yourself, coward." Jake realized what was happening. The shadow stalker was testing them. It wanted to see how they reacted to threats. It was learning about their weapons and tactics before attacking. The first real attack came from above. The shadow stalker dropped from the trees like a falling shadow. Jake caught a glimpse of it in the weapon lights. It was huge and moved like liquid darkness. Its claws flashed once and Korthek, a proud Valdorian warrior, fell dead with his throat cut. The creature vanished again before anyone could fire a shot. It had been there for less than 3 seconds. Now they were 6 instead of 7. "Impossible," Zexler roared. "Nothing moves that fast." Jake had seen it clearly in that brief moment. The shadow stalker was not just fast, it was graceful. It moved like a dancer who knew exactly where every step would land. This was not a mindless beast. This was something that had been practicing. For a very long time, night fell completely and the alien warriors activated their defensive systems. Motion sensors formed an electronic web around their camp. Thermal scanners searched for heat signatures. Energy barriers created walls of crackling power. "Let it come now," Zexler said with confidence. "Our technology will detect it long before it reaches us." Jake asked permission to scout the perimeter. The aliens agreed quickly. They wanted him gone and expected him to die. Jake took only his rifle and knife and walked into the dark jungle alone. As he moved away from the bright lights and humming machines, Jake felt the jungle come alive around him. he heard the real sounds of the night. Insects calling to each other, small animals moving through the undergrowth, and something else. Something big and intelligent, watching and waiting. Jake found a fallen log and sat down quietly. He turned off all his equipment and let the darkness surround him. This was how his ancestors had hunted thousands of years ago. Not with fancy weapons and sensors, but with patience and understanding. Somewhere in the black jungle, the shadow stalker was learning about its new prey. Jake decided it was time for him to start learning too. Jake moved through the dark jungle like his grandfather had taught him to move through the forest back on Earth. Step carefully, test each foothold, breathe quietly, and most importantly, listen with everything you have. The alien warriors back at camp were making enough noise to wake the dead with their generators and energy shields. Out here in the real jungle, Jake could hear the truth of this place. The shadow stalker was close. Jake could feel it the way a deer feels a wolf nearby. Not with his eyes or ears, but with something deeper. Some old part of his brain that remembered when humans were both hunters and hunted. His skin prickled and the hair on his neck stood up. He found a thick tree with good cover and settled against it to wait. Waiting was something humans did better than most species. They could sit still for hours without moving, just watching and learning. Most aliens got bored or impatient. They wanted action right away. The first attack on the main camp came at midnight. Jake heard the energy weapons firing in rapid bursts, then sudden silence. When he crept back to check, he found the HFY dead. The big Sorok warrior had been guarding the north side of their perimeter. His thermal scanner was still working, but it had not saved him. The shadow stalker had somehow gotten past all their technology without triggering a single alarm. Jake studied the scene carefully. The creature had approached from downwind, staying below the sensor's detection range. It had killed the HFY with a single strike to the base of his skull, then vanished again. 2 down, Jake whispered to himself. 5 left. He returned to his watching post and waited for the next attack. It came 2 hours later from the east side of camp. This time Jake was ready. He saw the shadow stalker moving through the trees like a piece of the night itself. Its skin changed color to match everything around it. When it stopped, it became completely invisible, but Jake had learned to track movement, not just shape. He watched for the small things that could not be hidden. A leaf moving wrong, a branch bending under weight, a shadow that fell the wrong way. The creature was beautiful in a deadly way. It moved with the grace of a big cat, but the intelligence of something much more advanced. Every step was planned. Every movement had purpose. It studied the camp for 20 minutes before choosing its target. Poor HFY never had a chance. The Cretan warrior was checking his weapon when death came from above. The shadow stalker dropped from the trees, struck once, and was gone before the body hit the ground. Jake watched all of this happen and made no move to warn the others. They would not have listened anyway. They thought their weapons and armor made them safe. They did not understand that sometimes the best weapon was the one between your ears. After the third attack, the remaining aliens became desperate. HFY ordered them to group together in the center of camp with all their lights pointing outward. They formed a tight circle with their backs to each other and their weapons ready. "It cannot get all of us if we stay together," HFY declared. Jake almost laughed. The shadow stalker was not trying to kill them all at once. It was having fun. Each attack was a test to see how they would react. The creature was playing with them like a cat plays with mice. The fourth attack was different. Instead of killing someone, the shadow stalker just appeared at the edge of the light, let them see it clearly, then vanished when they fired their weapons. It was showing off, proving that their guns and sensors meant nothing. Jake got his first good look at the creature during this encounter. It was massive but not clumsy. Its hide was dark gray with patterns that shifted like water. Its eyes were large and intelligent, glowing with a soft amber light. Most importantly, those eyes showed no anger or hatred. This thing was not killing out of rage. It was curious. That changed everything for Jake. A mad beast was dangerous but predictable. A curious, intelligent being was something else entirely. It meant the shadow stalker was trying to understand them just like they were trying to understand it. The fifth night, Jake did something that would have seemed insane to the alien warriors. He left his rifle behind and walked out into the jungle, carrying only his knife. Not to fight, but to learn. He found a small clearing about half a mile from camp and sat down in the center. Then he waited. If the Shadow Stalker was truly intelligent, it would be curious about this strange behavior. A prey animal sitting alone in the open was either very stupid or very confident. The creature came to investigate, just as Jake had hoped. It approached the clearing slowly, staying hidden in the tree line. Jake could feel it watching him, but he did not turn to look. Instead, he sat perfectly still and breathed slowly. He made himself as non-threatening as possible. After an hour, the Shadow Stalker stepped into the clearing. It moved with careful steps, ready to vanish at the first sign of danger. Jake still did not look directly at it. He had learned that direct eye contact was often seen as a challenge by predators. The creature circled him 3 times, getting closer each time. Jake could hear its breathing and smell its scent. It smelled like rain and earth and something wild that had no name. When it was close enough to touch, Jake finally turned his head slowly to meet its gaze. The Shadow Stalker froze when their eyes met. For a long moment they studied each other in the moonlight. Jake saw intelligence there, and loneliness, and something that might have been hope. The creature tilted its massive head like a dog trying to understand a new sound. Jake spoke softly in English, using the same tone he would use to calm a frightened animal. "Hello there, you are not what they think you are you?" The Shadow Stalker made a sound Jake had never heard before. It was not a roar or growl. It was almost musical, like a whale song, but smaller. The creature was trying to communicate. They sat together in the clearing for 2 more hours. The Shadow Stalker would make sounds, and Jake would respond with words or gestures. Neither understood the other's language, but they were having a conversation of sorts. Jake began to realize that this creature had been alone for a very long time, maybe years. Maybe much longer. When dawn began to lighten the sky, the Shadow Stalker stood and walked to the edge of the clearing. It turned back once to look at Jake, made its musical sound again, then melted into the jungle like it had never been there. Jake returned to camp to find chaos. The remaining 3 aliens were arguing loudly about what to do next. Some wanted to call for rescue. Others wanted to hunt the creature with everything they had. Dr. Rodriguez looked exhausted and frightened. "Where have you been?" Zexler demanded when he saw Jake. "We thought you were dead." "I was learning," Jake replied simply. "Learning what?" Keshrak asked. The young Sorok was the only one who seemed genuinely curious about Jake's answer. Jake looked at each of them carefully before speaking. "I learned that we have been hunting the wrong thing. The Shadow Stalker is not a mindless beast. It is the last of its kind, and it has been protecting something very important." The alien stared at him like he had lost his mind. But Jake knew he was right. The creature's behavior, its careful attacks, the way it arranged the equipment of dead hunters, it was not random violence. It was the desperate action of a guardian who had forgotten how to tell friend from enemy. "You are insane," Zexler said. "It is a killer and nothing more." Jake shook his head. "No, it is a survivor, and I think I know what it wants." Zexler's red eyes blazed with fury when Jake suggested the Shadow Stalker was not just a killer. The massive Krithan commander slammed his clawed fist into a nearby tree, leaving deep gouges in the bark. "You speak madness, human," Zexler growled. "That thing murdered my warriors. It hunts us like prey. There is no intelligence in such actions, only bloodlust." Dr. Rodriguez had been quiet during the argument, but now she stepped forward with her scanner in her hands. Her dark eyes looked thoughtful behind her glasses. "Actually," she said slowly, "Jake might be onto something. I have been studying the attack patterns, and they show unusual characteristics for a simple predator." Keshrak moved closer, his young scales bright with curiosity. "What kind of characteristics?" Elena pulled up data on her tablet. "Look at this." Each attack was precisely timed. The creature never struck when multiple targets could respond. It chose isolated victims and killed them with minimal violence. These are not the actions of a rage-driven beast. Korth, the remaining Valdorian warrior, waved all four of his arms in dismissal. You scientists see patterns in everything. Sometimes. A killer is just a killer. Jake stood up and shouldered his pack. There is only one way to find out for sure. I know where it wants us to go. The others stared at him in shock. You know where it is? Zexler demanded. Not where it is. Corrected. Where it wants us to go. It has been leading us somewhere since we landed. All those claw marks we found, they form a trail. The Shadow Stalker wants to show us something. Elena looked at her maps and tracking data. After several minutes, she nodded slowly. He is right. The attack sites form a rough line pointing deeper into the jungle, toward the center of the continent. This is foolishness, Zexler declared. We should call for extraction and return with a larger force. No, Jake said firmly. If we leave now, we will never understand what this is really about. The Shadow Stalker could have killed all of us on the first night if it wanted to. Instead, it has been testing us, teaching us, guiding us. That means it wants something from us. Keshrak tilted his reptilian head thoughtfully. What could it possibly want from us? Understanding, Jake replied. I think it has been alone here for a very long time. Maybe it wants to communicate but does not know how. The argument continued for another hour, but in the end, Jake's quiet confidence won out. Even Zexler had to admit that their original plan was not working. They packed their remaining supplies and followed Jake deeper into the jungle. The trail led them through increasingly ancient parts of the forest. The trees here were massive and old, their trunks so wide that 10 people could not wrap their arms around them. Vines hung down like curtains and strange flowers glowed with their own. Light dot as they walked, Jake noticed that the jungle sounds were different. Less harsh and more musical. Birds sang in complex harmonies and the wind through the leaves sounded almost like voices. This place felt sacred somehow. They found more claw marks along the way, but these were different from the earlier ones. Instead of warnings, they seemed like directions. The Shadow Stalker was definitely guiding them somewhere specific. After 6 hours of walking, they emerged into a large clearing dominated by ancient stone structures. The buildings were unlike anything any of them had seen before. They were carved from black stone and covered with symbols that seemed to shift and change when you looked at them directly. These ruins are not in any of our databases, Elena said, as she scanned the structures. They predate all known civilizations in this sector. Jake walked toward the largest building, a pyramid-shaped structure with steps leading to a flat top. The Shadow Stalker's claw marks were everywhere here, but they were not random scratches. They were careful additions to the existing symbols, as if the creature was maintaining or updating the ancient writing. It lives here, Jake said with certainty. This was its people's city. Before anyone could respond, the Shadow Stalker appeared. At the top of the pyramid. In the daylight, Jake could see it clearly for the first time. It was even more magnificent than he had imagined. Its hide was not just gray, but contained every color of the forest. Its eyes were large and wise, showing intelligence that matched any sentient species. The creature made its musical sound, and gestured toward the pyramid with one massive clawed hand. It was inviting them to approach. It wants us to come closer, Jake said. It wants to kill us, Zexler snarled, raising his weapon. No, Elena said, studying her readings. My sensors show no aggressive posturing. Its body language suggests curiosity, not hostility. Jake started walking toward the pyramid. I'm going up there. You are insane, Korth declared. It will tear you apart. But Jake had already started climbing the stone steps. Each step brought him closer to the Shadow Stalker, which watched his approach with intense interest. When Jake reached the top, the creature stepped back to give him room, but did not flee. Got up close, Jake could see that the Shadow Stalker was old. Very old, its hide bore scars from countless years, and its eyes held the weight of deep loneliness. This was not a young predator in its prime. This was an ancient guardian who had been alone far too long. The creature gestured toward a series of carved panels on the pyramid's peak. The symbols told a story that Jake could not read but somehow understood. They showed a great civilization, a terrible disaster, and one survivor left to guard what remained. "You are the last one," Jake said softly. "Your people are gone, and you have been protecting this place ever since." The Shadow Stalker made a sound that might have been agreement. It touched one of the carved panels with surprising gentleness, then looked at Jake with those wise amber eyes. Suddenly, Zexther's voice roared from below. "Get away from it, human!" Jake turned to see the Krithen commander charging up the pyramid steps with his weapon raised. The Shadow Stalker reacted instantly, but instead of attacking Jake, it moved to protect him. The creature placed itself between Jake and the approaching threat. "Stop!" Jake shouted, but Zexther was beyond reason. The alien commander had lost too many warriors to think clearly. Zexther fired his energy weapon at the Shadow Stalker. The beam struck the creature in the shoulder and it staggered but did not fall. Instead of fleeing or attacking, it remained between Jake and Zexther. "You will not take another of my warriors." Zexther roared as he charged. The Shadow Stalker could have killed the Krithen commander easily, but it chose not to. Instead, it caught Zexther in its massive arms and simply held him. The alien warrior struggled and cursed, but he could not break free. Jake approached the struggling pair and placed his hand on the Shadow Stalker's uninjured arm. "Easy," he said in the same calm tone he had used in the clearing. "Do not hurt him. He is afraid and angry, but he is not evil." The creature looked at Jake for a long moment, then gently set Zexther down on the stone platform. The Krithen commander scrambled backward, his weapon lost and his pride shattered. "Why did it not kill me?" Zexther asked in confusion. Jake smiled as understanding finally came to him. "Because it recognizes something in us that it has been missing. We are not just hunters or prey to it. We are potential friends." The Shadow Stalker made its musical sound again and gestured toward the ancient buildings below. It wanted to show them something important, something that would change everything they thought they knew about this place and its guardian. "It wants to share its home with us," Jake said. "The question is, are we wise enough to accept?" The Shadow Stalker led them down from the pyramid and through the ancient city with the careful steps of someone showing honored guests around their home. Jake walked beside the massive creature while the others followed at a respectful distance. Even Zexther had stopped arguing after being gently overpowered by a being that could have easily killed him. The city was far older and more complex than it had first appeared. Buildings were connected by covered walkways, carved with symbols that seemed to tell the story of an entire civilization. Gardens grew between the structures, tended by no one but somehow still thriving after countless years. Dr. Rodriguez was scanning everything with her equipment. Her readings showed technology far beyond anything the current Galactic Alliance possessed. "These power signatures are incredible," she whispered. "Some of these systems are still active after millennia." The Shadow Stalker stopped at a building that looked different from the others. It was smaller but more ornate, with crystal panels that glowed with soft light. The creature made its musical sound and touched a panel beside the entrance. The door opened silently. Inside was a chamber that took their breath away. The walls were covered with moving images that showed the history of this world. They watched as a proud civilization reached for the stars, then fell to a cosmic disaster that turned their planet into a jungle wasteland. "My God," Elena breathed. "This is a historical archive. These beings recorded everything." The images showed the last days of the Shadow Stalker's people, a plague from space that turned their bodies to stone. Ships fleeing to other worlds, carrying the survivors to safety, and one volunteer who stayed behind to guard their most sacred sites. The Shadow Stalker touched the wall and the images changed. Now they showed the long years of solitude. Centuries of waiting and protecting with no contact from the outside. Galaxy. The creature had maintained the city and its technology alone, growing older and more isolated with each passing year. "You have been here for over 1,000 years, Jake said with amazement. The creature nodded and made a sound that conveyed deep sadness. It gestured to other panels that showed the recent arrivals, mining ships, hunting parties, explorers. All had been met with violence because the Shadow Stalker had forgotten how to tell friend from enemy. It has been defending this place from what it saw as invaders, Elena realized. It did not know they were just visitors. The Shadow Stalker led them deeper into the chamber, to a section that made even the battle-hardened aliens gasp in wonder. Here were technologies that could reshape matter at the molecular level, healing devices that could cure any wound, power sources that drew energy from the quantum foam of space itself. "This is what you have been protecting," Jake said. "The knowledge of your people." The creature made its musical sound again, but this time there was hope in it. It touched another panel and new images appeared. These showed the Shadow Stalker teaching the strange new visitors about its people's legacy, sharing the knowledge that had been kept safe for so long. Keshrak moved closer to study, a device that seemed to be some kind of medical scanner. "Why show us this? We are just hunters." The Shadow Stalker looked at the young Sorok, then at each of the others in turn. When its gaze came to Jake, it held his eyes for a long moment. Then it did something none of them expected. It knelt down on one knee and bowed its massive head. "It is showing respect," Elena said in amazement. "But why?" Jake understood before the others did. The Shadow Stalker had been testing them all along, but not for strength or combat skill. It had been looking for something much rarer and more precious. It was looking for someone who could see beyond the surface, Jake said. Someone who would try to understand instead of just destroy. Most hunters came here planning to kill it and take trophies. We are the first group to try to communicate. The creature stood and walked to a wall covered with symbols that glowed brighter than the others. It touched several of them in a complex pattern and spoke in its musical language. The meaning was clear even without translation. "It is performing some kind of ceremony," Elena said as she recorded everything. The Shadow Stalker returned to Jake and gently placed one massive clawed hand on his shoulder. The touch was surprisingly warm and careful. The creature spoke again, and this time, Jake felt the meaning in his mind rather than his ears. "Hunterkin," the words formed in his thoughts. "Brother Guardian, packmate," tears came to Jake's eyes as he understood. The Shadow Stalker was not just showing respect. It was claiming him as family. After 1,000 years of loneliness, it had found someone who understood the burden of protection and the value of patience over violence. Jake placed his small human hand over the creature's massive claw. "I accept," he said simply. "You are not alone anymore." The Shadow Stalker made a sound of pure joy that echoed through the chamber like beautiful music. It had found something it thought was lost forever. Not just companionship, but true understanding. The others watched in stunned silence as the ancient guardian shared more of its people's knowledge. Medical techniques that could extend life by centuries. Engineering principles that could build ships faster than light. Agricultural methods that could feed entire planets. It wants to share all of this with the galaxy, Elena realized, but only if we promise to use it wisely. Zexler had been quiet through most of the ceremony, but now he stepped forward. The proud Krithan commander looked very different than he had when they first landed. His armor was dirty and his weapons were forgotten. Most importantly, his red eyes showed humility instead of arrogance. "I was wrong," Zexler said directly to Jake. "You succeeded where all of us failed. You found strength and understanding, rather than violence." The Shadow Stalker looked at Zexler and made a questioning sound. Jake could feel its thoughts touching his mind. "It wants to know if you are trustworthy," Jake told the commander. "It has been betrayed before by those who sought its knowledge for war." Zexler knelt down as the Shadow Stalker had done. "I swear by my ancestors that I will protect this knowledge and use it only for peace. I have learned that true strength comes from wisdom, not weapons." One by one, the others made similar promises. Even Korth, who had mocked Jake from the beginning, showed respect for what they had witnessed. The Shadow Stalker spent the next several hours teaching them basic elements of its people's language and showing them how to operate some of the simpler devices. It was clear that this was only the beginning. There were libraries of knowledge here that would take years to fully understand. As the sun began to set, the creature made a decision that surprised them all. It walked to a wall covered with travel equipment and began gathering supplies. When they asked what it was doing, Jake translated its musical explanation. "It is coming with us," Jake announced. "After 1,000 years, it is ready to leave this place and see the galaxy again. But who will guard the city?" Keshrak asked. The Shadow Stalker touched a panel and the entire complex began to glow with protective energy. Ancient defense systems activated, creating barriers that would keep the knowledge safe until the creature's return. It has always been able to leave, Jake realized. It stayed because it had no reason to go anywhere else. Now it has found friends. As they prepared to return to their ship, the Shadow Stalker did something that would be remembered in Galactic history. It formally adopted Jake as part of its family line, marking him with symbols that meant Hunterkin and Truthseeker in its ancient language. The journey back to the Starbreaker was very different from their arrival. Instead of a hunting party seeking a trophy, they were now ambassadors carrying news that would change how the galaxy viewed both humans and the creatures they shared space with. Jake walked beside his new adopted kinsman and thought about what they had accomplished. They had come to kill a monster and instead found a lonely guardian with wisdom beyond measure. The Shadow Stalker had taught them that real strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to preserve and protect. When they reached the ship, Captain Torres and his crew stared in amazement at the massive creature that followed Jake onto the deck. The Shadow Stalker looked around at the metal corridors and humming machinery with curious eyes that made its musical sound of approval. "Mission accomplished," Jake reported to the captain. "We found the Shadow Stalker." "And?" Torres asked nervously. Jake smiled as he watched his new kinsman examine the ship's systems with gentle curiosity. "And it turns out we were never hunting it at all. It was hunting us, looking for someone worthy of its trust." The Shadow Stalker, whose true name translated to Last Guardian of the First Knowledge, had found what it was looking for. Not in the strongest warrior or the most advanced technology, but in a simple human who understood that sometimes the greatest victory comes from choosing not to fight at all. As the Starbreaker lifted off from Zarian 7, Jake stood beside the Last Guardian on the observation deck. Together they watched the jungle planet fall away below them, carrying its secrets safely into space for the first time in 1,000 years. The galaxy would never be the same.